December the 5th, 1945. Someone so just 10 p.m. 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers thundered down the runway at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, Florida. 14 young men, most of them fresh from World War II, which had ended just 3 months earlier, climb into the sunny December sky for what should be a routine 3-hour training flight. Navigation problem number 1, they call it. Fly east, drop practice bombs, turn north over Grand Bahama Island, then southwest back to base. Simple, they've done it before. But something goes terribly wrong. At 3:40 p.m., just 90 minutes after takeoff, Lieutenant Charles Taylor radios the tower. We seem to be off course. We cannot see land. Repeat, we cannot see land. What is your position? The tower asks. We don't know. Taylor responds. We think we must have passed over Florida and must be in the Gulf of Mexico. But they're not in the Gulf of Mexico. They're over the Atlantic Ocean, flying farther and farther from shore with every passing minute. And Taylor's compass isn't working. For the next 3 hours, radio operators on the ground listen helplessly as Flight 19 becomes hopelessly lost. The last transmission comes at 7:04 p.m., a pilot trying desperately to reach Taylor. Then silence. A massive search and rescue operation launches immediately. But here's where the story becomes truly bizarre. The rescue plane, a Martin PBM Mariner flying boat with 13 crew members, vanishes too. 27 minutes after takeoff, it simply disappears from the radar. In total, 6 aircraft and 27 men vanish without a trace over what would become known as the Bermuda Triangle. No wreckage, no oil slicks, no bodies, nothing. For 80 years, Flight 19 has been the centerpiece of one of aviation's greatest mysteries. Was it the Bermuda Triangle, alien abduction, magnetic anomalies, or something far more tragic and human? Today, we're diving deep into the disappearance that launched 1,000 conspiracy theories. To understand what happened, we need to look at who these men were and what their mission entailed. Flight 19 was the designation of a group of 5 General Motors TBM Avenger torpedo bombers that disappeared over the Bermuda Triangle on December 5th, 1945, after losing contact during a United States Navy overwater navigation training flight from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The mission leader was Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, a 27-year-old combat veteran with more than 2,500 hours flying experience, 61 of them in combat operations. He'd flown missions in the Pacific Theater aboard USS Hancock and had recently become a flight instructor in Miami. The other 4 pilots were student aviators, Marine Captains Edward Joseph Powers and George William Stivers, Marine Second Lieutenant Forrest James Gerber, and Navy Ensign Joseph Tipton Bossy. Each had about 300 hours of flight time and 60 hours in the TBM Avenger. 9 enlisted men served as gunners and radiomen. Some of them were still teenagers, yet also veterans of World War II, which had ended just 3 months earlier. The aircraft were TBM Avengers, robust, reliable torpedo bombers built by General Motors under wartime license. These weren't fragile aircraft, they were workhorses designed to take punishment and keep flying. The aircraft were 3 TBM-1Cs, 1 TBM-1E, and 1 TBM-3. Each was fully fueled, and during pre-flight checks, it was discovered they were all missing clocks. This wasn't considered a serious problem since navigation would rely on dead reckoning, calculating position based on time, speed, and direction. Each man had his own watch. Takeoff was scheduled for 1:45 p.m., but was delayed when Lieutenant Taylor arrived late. At 2:10 p.m., the 5 Avengers finally roared into the sky. The flight plan was straightforward. Leg 1. Fly 091 degrees east for 56 miles to Hens and Chicken Shoals. Drop practice bombs. Leg 2. Turn north and fly 73 miles. Leg 3. Turn southwest and fly 140 miles back to Fort Lauderdale. Total flight time, approximately 3 hours. Estimated return, 5:15 p.m. The weather was good. Sunny, light winds. A storm front was approaching but wasn't expected until evening. All flights were scheduled to return well before it arrived. Everything seemed routine, normal, safe. The first leg of the mission went perfectly. At 2:30 p.m., Flight 19 reached Hens and Chicken Shoals and conducted practice bomb runs without incident. Then they turned north for the second leg, and that's when Lieutenant Charles Taylor's world fell apart. Around 3:40 p.m., Lieutenant Robert Cox, another instructor flying near the Florida coast, overheard radio transmissions from Flight 19. Taylor asked if anyone in the area had a radar screen that could pick up the group's location in real time, but no such technology was readily available. Cox heard Taylor say, "Both my compasses are out. I am trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down." Cox was confused. What is your altitude? What is your present position?" "I don't know where we are," Taylor admitted. "We must have gotten lost after that last turn." The problem was clear. Taylor believed he was over the Florida Keys, the chain of islands extending southwest from mainland Florida. If that were true, flying north would bring them to the Gulf of Mexico, and flying east would bring them back to Fort Lauderdale. But Taylor wasn't over the Keys. He was over Grand Bahama Island, exactly where he was supposed to be according to the flight plan. For reasons that are still unclear, Taylor became convinced that his Avenger's compass was malfunctioning and that his planes had been flying in the wrong direction. Why? We don't know. Some researchers suggest Taylor may have confused Grand Bahama with the Florida Keys. They have similar geography of small islands and sandbars. Others point to his extensive combat experience in the Pacific, where navigation was different, and suggest he became spatially disoriented. What we know is that once Taylor made this incorrect assumption, every decision that followed made the situation worse. Cox tried to help. "Your transmissions are fading. You are flying away from Fort Lauderdale. If you fly east on a heading of Aero 90, you will reach land." Taylor disagreed. If he was over the Keys, which he wasn't, flying east would take him deeper into the Gulf of Mexico, which it wouldn't. So he refused. By 4:25 p.m., a front blew in and brought rain, gusting winds, and heavy cloud cover. Visibility dropped. The seas grew rough, and Flight 19 kept flying north, away from Florida, out over the open Atlantic. Ground stations tried desperately to guide them home, but Taylor repeatedly refused to turn east. At one point, he suggested handing command over to one of his students, who had a working compass, but for reasons unclear, this never happened. As the sun set and fuel gauges dropped toward empty, the transmissions from Flight 19 became increasingly desperate. At 6:20 p.m., Taylor radioed, "When the first man gets down to 10 gallons of gas, we will all land in the water together." It was a death sentence, but what choice did they have? The TBM Avenger could stay afloat for about 2 minutes after ditching, if conditions were calm. But the Navy's Board of Investigation later concluded that the state of the sea in the area in which Flight 19 was presumed to have landed was rough and unfavorable for a water landing. Ground stations continued trying to reach them. Radio operators in Florida, the Bahamas, even Cuba all tried to help. But Taylor was confused, exhausted, and running out of options. In retrospect, it is an agonizing irony that by this point, rescue units could no longer reach Flight 19 directly, but they could still hear garbled transmissions between the 5 planes. At 7:04 p.m., the last known message came from Ensign Joseph Bossy, one of the plane's pilots, who tried to reach Taylor. No response was heard. Then nothing. Silence. Exactly what happened next remains a mystery. Did the men stay together, run out of fuel, and successfully ditch their planes? If so, how long did they survive in the water? The most likely outcome is that the men ran out of gas and went into the ocean, says John Bloom, director of the Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale Museum. In rough seas at night, with no moonlight, the Avengers would have hit the water hard. The aircraft probably broke apart on impact. Even if some crew members survived the crash, hypothermia in the cold December waters would have killed them within hours. 14 men dead, 5 aircraft lost, and the tragedy was about to get worse. At 7:27 p.m., 2 Martin PBM Mariner flying boats launched from Naval Air Station Banana River, now Cape Canaveral, to search for Flight 19. The Mariner was a large twin-engine seaplane, capable of landing on water to rescue downed aviators. One carried 13 crew members, including pilot Lieutenant Walter G. Jeffrey. At 7:50 p.m., the Mariner radioed a routine position report. Then at 7:57 p.m., just 30 minutes after takeoff, the plane called in a routine message a few minutes later, but disappeared off the radar entirely within around 20 minutes of takeoff. Ground controllers tried to raise them, no response. The aircraft had simply vanished. Around 9:45 p.m., the crew of the SS Gainesmill, a merchant ship, reported seeing a large explosion near the water in the area where the Mariner had been flying. An orange ball of fire rose into the sky, burned for several minutes, then disappeared. The Mariner had exploded in midair. Why? The report attributed the loss of the PBM search aircraft to an explosion in midair while searching for the flight. The PBM Mariner had a notorious reputation. Air crews called it the flying gas tank because fuel vapor often accumulated in the aircraft, creating explosive conditions. A single spark from static electricity, faulty wiring, or even a cigarette could trigger a catastrophic explosion. That appears to be what happened. 13 more men dead, another aircraft lost. By midnight on December the 5th, 1945, the U.S. Navy couldn't account for 6 aircraft and 27 men. At dawn on December 6th, the Navy launched one of the largest air-sea rescue operations in history. Over 300 aircraft participated. Surface vessels, Navy ships, Coast Guard cutters, merchant ships scoured the waters. Over the next 5 days, searchers covered more than 250,000 square miles of ocean. They found nothing, no wreckage, no oil slicks, no bodies, no life rafts, no trace whatsoever of Flight 19 or the rescue Mariner. How could 6 aircraft and 27 men simply vanish? The Navy convened a board of investigation in Miami on December 10, 1945. They interviewed witnesses, analyzed weather data, studied navigation charts, and reconstructed the flight path based on radio transmissions. Their conclusion was devastating. Lieutenant Taylor had become disoriented, believed he was over the Florida Keys when he was actually over the Bahamas, and led his flight out over the Atlantic Ocean, where they ran out of fuel and crashed. The board's final report stated, the 5 TBMs and naval personnel disappeared as a result of causes or reasons unknown after having taken off on a routine navigational flight out of Fort Lauderdale on 5th December 1945. But Taylor's mother was furious. Her son was a war hero, a decorated pilot with over 2,500 hours of flight time. How could the Navy blame him for this tragedy? She lobbied the Navy Department relentlessly. And in 1947, the Navy amended its report, changing the cause from pilot error to simply cause unknown. This single change, removing the blame from Taylor, would have enormous consequences because if the cause was unknown, then what really happened? The mystery was officially unsolved, and where facts end, speculation begins. For years, the disappearance of Flight 19 remained a tragic but relatively obscure incident. Then came the 1960s. In 1962, author Vincent Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine titled The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. He described an area of ocean between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico where ships and planes disappeared with alarming frequency. Flight 19 became the centerpiece of his theory. In 1964, Gaddis expanded his article into a book. Other writers followed. In 1974, Charles Berlitz published The Bermuda Triangle, which became a massive bestseller, selling over 5 million copies. Berlitz and others embellished the Flight 19 story with fabricated radio transmissions. For example, a 1962 magazine article about the Flight 19 disappearance references the radio transmission. Everything looks wrong, strange. The ocean doesn't look as it should. And in Charles Berlitz's book, The Bermuda Triangle, 1974, you'll find, "Don't come after us. They look like they're from outer space." Although several of these purported radio messages have entered the mythology of the Flight 19, there is no good evidence that any of them are real. But the damage was done. The legend had taken on a life of its own. In 1977, Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind featured Flight 19 in its opening scene. The planes are discovered in the Sonoran Desert, deposited there by aliens, with the crews eventually returned decades later, not having aged a day. The Bermuda Triangle became a cultural phenomenon. Documentaries, books, TV specials, and movies all explored the mystery. Theories proliferated: magnetic anomalies, time warps, portals to other dimensions, underwater alien bases, even the lost continent of Atlantis. Flight 19 had transformed from a tragic accident into a supernatural legend. So what really happened to Flight 19? The evidence overwhelmingly supports a tragic but mundane explanation. Pilot error, navigational confusion, and bad luck. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, an experienced pilot, became disoriented. He mistook Grand Bahama Island for the Florida Keys, an understandable error given their similar appearance. Once he made that wrong assumption, every subsequent decision moved Flight 19 farther from safety. His compass was probably working fine. Taylor just didn't trust it. Combat pilots in the Pacific had learned to navigate by landmarks and dead reckoning. Taylor relied on those skills when his instruments disagreed with his assumptions, and he was wrong. The student pilots deferred to their instructor as they'd been trained to do. They followed him to their deaths. The most likely scenario is that the planes eventually ran out of gas and ditched in the ocean somewhere off the coast of Florida, leaving any survivors at the mercy of rough seas and deep water. In rough seas at night, the Avengers probably broke apart on impact. Any survivors would have faced hypothermia in waters around 70 degrees cold enough to kill within hours. The aircraft sank in deep water, possibly thousands of feet down, where they remain today. The rescue Mariner exploded due to fuel vapor ignition, a known hazard with that aircraft type. That's the truth. No aliens, no magnetic anomalies, no Bermuda Triangle. Just a combination of human error, equipment limitations, bad weather, and tragic timing. In 1991, treasure hunters discovered 5 Avengers off the coast of Fort Lauderdale and believed they'd found Flight 19. But it was later found that the hulks belonged to a different group of Navy planes whose serial numbers didn't match those of the fabled Lost Patrol. As of the 2020s, no trace of the 5 TBM Avengers or the PBM Mariner and the 27 missing aviators have been found. They may never be found. The ocean is vast, and 80 years is a long time. Flight 19 wasn't a mystery. It was a tragedy. 14 young men on 5 aircraft, most of them war veterans who had survived the Pacific Theater, died in a training accident 3 months after World War II ended. 13 more died trying to rescue them. They didn't deserve to become fodder for conspiracy theories. They deserved to be remembered as what they were, servicemen who died in the line of duty. The Bermuda Triangle doesn't exist. It's a fiction created by writers looking to sell books. The number of ships and planes that disappear in that region is no higher than anywhere else when adjusted for traffic volume. Reputable maritime and aviation organizations don't recognize it as a hazard. What does exist is the Atlantic Ocean, vast, powerful, and unforgiving. It has claimed thousands of lives throughout history, including 27 men on December 5, 1945. In total, 6 aircraft carrying 27 men, 14 from Flight 19, and 13 from the patrol bomber vanished over the so-called Bermuda Triangle that day. No confirmed trace of them has ever been found. Every year, the Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale Museum holds a memorial ceremony for Flight 19. They read the names, they honor the sacrifice, they remember the truth, not the legend. Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, Captain Edward Joseph Powers, Captain George William Stivers, Second Lieutenant Forrest James Gerber, Ensign Joseph Tipton Bossy, and the 9 enlisted men who flew with them didn't disappear into another dimension. They died serving their country. Let's remember them that way. Thank you for watching. If you found this deep dive into Flight 19 fascinating, please subscribe for more World War II content. And let me know in the comments, did you believe in the Bermuda Triangle before watching this? What do you think really happened? Until next time, remember, sometimes the truth is more tragic than any mystery.